Contemplations before chanting. The Sangha is invited to come back to our breathing so that our collective energy of mindfulness will bring us back together as an organism, going as a river with no more separation. Let the whole Sangha breathe as one body, chant as one body, listen as one body, and transcend the boundaries of a delusive self, liberating from the superiority complex, the inferiority complex, and the equality complex. Xin đại chúng trở về với hơi thở và để cho năng lượng chánh niệm tập thể đưa chúng ta về với nhau như một cơ thể, đi như một dòng sông, không còn cách biệt. Xin đại chúng tất cả đều thở như một cơ thể, xướng tụng như một người, lắng nghe như một người và vượt thoát biên giới ngã chấp, phá bỏ mặc cảm hơn người, thua người và bằng người.
From the depths of understanding, the flower of faith eloquence blooms, the Bodhisattva stands majestically upon the waves of birth and death, relief from all affliction, the great compassion eliminates all sickness, even that one thought of as incurable. The wondrous light sweeps away all obstacles and dangers. The willow branch one's way reveals countless Buddha lands. The lotus flower blossoms a multitude of practice centers. We bow to her, we see her true presence in the here and now. We offer her the incense of our hearts. May the Bodhisattva of deep listening and grace us all with great compassion. Namo Avalokitesvaraya, Namo Avalokitesvaraya, Namo Avalokitesvaraya. Oh trên sóng xanh trần ai, cam lộ chữa lành cơn khổ đền, hào quang quét sạch muối nguy tai, điều biết phân bày muôn thế giới, xem hồng lờ hé vang lâu đài, cúi đầu ca ngợi dân hương thịnh, xin nguyện từ bi ân hiền hay. Nam mô Bồ Tát Quan Thế Âm. 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 Nam mô Bồ Tát Quan Thế Âm.
Dear respected Tay, dear noble community, before we begin, just to make sure if everyone can hear, the volume is okay for everyone. If the volume is okay, can you give a thumbs up so we can make sure? Okay. Thank you, everyone. So to begin, I'd like to invite everyone to find a comfortable seated position, whether you're in a chair or on a cushion. And we'll begin, as we always do, with 3 sounds of the bell, allowing the full in-breath and the full out-breath to inhabit our body, to relax our body. Dear Noble Community, good morning to everyone. Wherever you're joining us from, we warmly welcome you and appreciate your presence and practice with us for this wonderful online retreat together. Today is the 26th of May, 2021, and we're on our first official day of the Wake Up Online Retreat, co-hosted by the 3 U.S. monasteries and Plum Village together. I'm actually calling in from Florida, but very much appreciating the peaceful ambiance of the Great Meditation Hall at Blue Cliff. Thank you to the brothers and sisters for your wholehearted chanting this morning. So welcome everyone. Today we're speaking about the path of well-being. In the Buddha's first Dhamma talk, after his enlightenment, he spoke of the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths speaks of balance, of equilibrium. The path of well-being is the path of finding balance and equilibrium in our daily life through the suffering and the ease, the ill-being and the well-being. So in the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha pointed out that there is suffering to acknowledge, to be aware of, to embrace. But on the other hand, there is also the cessation of suffering, or in our tradition, we call it the birth of well-being. So it's very clear that happiness and suffering, they relate to one another. They are interdependent. Without suffering, happiness cannot arise. And also we know that happiness and suffering, they can coexist as well. We can see this in our daily lives. Perhaps in our time in this past year and a half, which has had major shifts in our life, we've touched both spaces of peace and spaces of stress. So these monumental shifts in our personal lives and in the collective life of our societies, our countries, has pushed us into this place of re-examining our relationship with our suffering and our happiness. We may like to ask ourselves, when we are touching change in our life, whether it's sudden or it's ongoing, a shift in our life, when we're touching stress, what options do we have? And I trust that we are all here because we are invested in this path of well-being, path towards well-being. So it's a conscientious choice that we have, even though sometimes we may feel overwhelmed. There is still a conscientious choice that we can make. So when there are shifts in our life, when we're presented with stress, there are two options really. One is in the direction of resetting our intentions, leaning into our resilience, touching the restorative capacities in us, and growing from that suffering. That's the first option. The second option is the option by default, the option of overwhelm, the option of surrender into our bad habits, into our habitual ways of thinking, our habitual ways of coping, which may have not taken us in the most healthy direction. So that's a question that I'd like to pose to you at the outset of this talk. In this past year and a half, which directions have we taken in our relationships, in our endeavors, in our self-care? Have we chosen the way of resilience and regeneration? Or have we given into habits, maybe bad habits? So the Buddha's teaching on the Four Noble Truths helps us to have a very practical framework for moving in the right direction of resilience and regeneration. Yes, there is suffering. And yes, there is happiness. Yes, there is ill-being. Yes, there is well-being. And there is a relationship between the two. There are causes and conditions that if we take the time through our practice, through our commitments, through our intentions to embrace and look more deeply into, we can find our way to the other shore of well-being, to transform that ill-being into well-being. So I hope that everyone has had a chance to listen and watch Brother Phap Hu's talk from yesterday to prepare for our retreat. So this exploration of which direction we take, it really begins with the practice of stopping. Our daily life has been very busy, maybe physically as well as mentally and emotionally. Perhaps we've been bombarded by a lot of sensory impressions in order to fill something in us, to cover up that void that may be there in the absence of connection with one another during this pandemic. So our mind is very busy, and I often think of a hummingbird when I think of the busy mind. Our mind is often so quick, our body is often so quick, we're a blur. We don't see very clearly both the joys in our life as well as the irritations and the sufferings until it becomes really big. And so I often think of the swiftness of a hummingbird when I think of the way we tend to live our daily life that doesn't allow us to go deeper into transformation. I had the chance to hold a hummingbird once. It was such an honor. I was in the dining hall of Blue Cliff, and one of the small hummingbirds got caught in the dining hall, and it was buzzing around trying to find its way out. But it couldn't find the door. It kept hitting itself up against the glass windows. So I got a cone hat and caught it with the cone hat, and I was able to catch it. And its heart was beating so quickly when I was holding it. And in holding that hummingbird, I had a chance to really look at it. It's very beautiful when you have a chance to see a hummingbird that's still, but it's very rare that we get to see that because that is not its nature. And our mind is like that, and our habits are like that. We are always running. But if we have the support like we have in this retreat, we learn that that is not the healthiest way to go, but it's better to come to a place of calm and stillness in order to start to begin to look, to see more deeply what's going on, first of all, what's going on around me, what's going on inside of me. So this stopping is an essential part of this path of well-being. Without stopping, how can we see? How can we really feel deeply what is going on around us and inside us? So from this place of stopping, we can manifest our hummingbird, calm hummingbird nature. And from this place of stillness, we have a chance to begin to look more deeply. In fact, our existence can be either very superficial or very deep, depending on our spirit, the spirit with which we interact, engage with the world, engage with ourselves. So in this stopping with the breath, we establish a baseline of just pure awareness. We might like to take 3 full breaths, and I'd like to invite you to come back to this baseline of pure awareness with me. Perhaps we can listen to a sound of the bell, and as we breathe in, breathe a full in-breath, just be aware of the in-breath, just be aware of the out-breath without interruption. This is our baseline of pure awareness. When we speak of stopping and mindfully breathing, we mean that we are breathing and we are aware that we are breathing. So it means that we practice not only to attend mindfully to something, but we also practice to be aware that we are attending to something. It's very different than watching a movie. We can be raptly watching a movie without being aware of our reactions, our physical, our emotional reactions to a horror movie, for example. But mindful attention means not only are we aware of the object of our attention, but we are also aware of our awareness. And that is the ingredient that allows us to begin to look and touch more deeply our experiences. So we are that tree that you see. Our experiences of the wind coming in, of the inputs coming in, of the news coming in, the conversations are the wind blowing our leaves and our branches. And when we begin to find an anchor in our breath as we breathe in and become aware of the contact of these words coming into my ears, or we become aware of the food that we're picking up to take into our body, we are starting to take control of our happiness. We are no longer reacting, being buffeted by the winds outside, but we are interacting with mindful intention in that action of breathing and doing, breathing and looking, breathing and hearing. We can make choices that are healthier for us, to put that down, to stop that conversation, to take a break, to take more of. So the stopping and the looking begins with our body, our breath. It also includes awareness of the reactions of our body, the sensations that we feel in our daily life, the small irritations. It also includes the awareness of our emotions as they arise. Without an awareness of our emotions become the master. Our anger becomes the master and controls us to act out in ways that we may regret later. But mindfulness, this word that we use all the time, this careful attention to what is going on, it extends beyond that, not just on our surface interactions with the outside world, but it goes deeper. We are a complex creatures. We have roots deep into our consciousness, and the practice of stopping and being present for what is coming up, arising from the depths of our consciousness, from the soil of our consciousness, is also our practice, our path of well-being. Because the tree does not come from nowhere. It comes from a ground, a soil, and depending on how rich or how poor that soil is, so too the tree will manifest. When we take this space to look more deeply into the soil of our consciousness, the seeds, we call them seeds of anger, seeds of compassion, seeds of empathy, we have a chance to then begin to understand ourselves more deeply from the root. And we are not just who we are in the present moment, but we are also a continuation of our ancestors, whether we like it or not, whether we have a great relationship with our folks or we have a very hard relationship with our folks, whether we know our grandparents and great-grandparents or we don't. The fact is that we are the entirety of our lineage, our ancestral lineage. And so this stopping and looking is a way of honoring ourselves. And this is why when we talk about our ancestors, when we talk about our personal histories, it's something that's very healing. Many of us may be very lucky that we are very in touch with our ancestry. A friend of my family's, she can go back 7 generations and she knows her whole family lineage. And she can glean from that knowledge her family history and learn about herself through the eyes, through the lens of her ancestry. But many of us are not that lucky. Many of us may come from a place of disconnect. For many of the Vietnamese people, I was born as a 2nd generation Vietnamese American, meaning I was born in the United States. But my parents and my grandparents, they all suffered directly from the Vietnam War, or the American War as we call it, held on the Vietnamese soil. And whether I know it or not, whether I choose to acknowledge it or not, the repercussions of that history of disconnect, of violence, of a diaspora continues on in my psyche, in my consciousness. It has marked me and continues to affect me in how I relate to the world, relate to myself. So it's a real privilege to be able to honor our ancestors and learn. And that is why in our country, in the United States, when we speak about looking more deeply at the history, the collective history of a nation, of the United States as it relates to the time of slavery, the time of erasure of Native Americans, it's a very healing process for those who have been erased from that awareness collectively and personally. So we can look at it as a collective practice of mindfulness, a collective practice of healing by opening to acknowledge what has previously been neglected or unacknowledged. In my personal life, I see this is true as well. I recently came across a term, childhood emotional neglect, CEN. And in a way, it mirrors what we see on a larger scale in society. The effects of neglect, meaning the very opposite of mindfulness. Mindfulness means to remember, first of all, to see, to be attentive to what is there, that awareness. And the very opposite is forgetfulness, erasure, neglect, right? So this collective emotional, even to the point of physical neglect, is a continuing trauma for many people. And so in our collective practice, it's also in our hearts to continue to open our sphere of awareness. As we go deeper for ourselves, we also go wider for those around us. So I'm very happy that Wake Up is here. Wake Up is a community of young people who have the heart to connect, to live healthily, to engage in a way that is meaningful and modernized, I might add. And we do need the help of our wake-uppers to help our whole community to collectively wake up to these neglected areas. So yes, we celebrate our ancestors. We give space to allow the voices of those who have not been heard to speak up so that we can collectively heal. Our roots go deep and our roots go wide. We are connected with one another. So on the path of well-being, this recognition that in our soil, there are strengths from our ancestors. I often call upon my mother when I need confidence, when I need earnestness, when I need sincerity. I think of her because I touch those seeds in her and I wake them up in myself. We receive all these strengths from our roots, our ancestors. And yes, we also receive the untransformed hurts and injuries and wounds from our ancestors as well. Sometimes it's not easy to receive this with an open heart because our loved ones are very close to us and they are the ones that most often affect us deeply. It's very hard to be magnanimous when we bear the brunt of some injury or hurt from an unskillfulness of a loved one, say our mother or our father. But still the path of well-being is to stop from running from that pain, that injury, that hurt, that resentment, and to look with more equanimity, to look with more empathy for ourselves. So in our soil, in the soil of our consciousness, we have all the elements that we need to suffer. And we also have all the elements we need to regenerate. In our soil, we have what we call the three poisons, both personally and collectively: attachment, aversion, and the ground of both, ignorance or delusion. On a collective level, we need only look at the imbalance in the climate to see the manifestation of greed, craving, and attachment. It manifests in the way that whole countries continue to exploit other countries, exploit other peoples, exploit other lands to feed that consumption, that craving. It leads to an imbalance. We need only look at the United States to see that. And every time I have a chance to speak about this, I always make it a point to point to the United States, because the US, as we know, is taking the lion's share of the resources. It's one of the top 2 countries that's taking the lion's share of the resources of the world. We are less than 5% of the world's population, but we are gobbling up 17% of the world's resources. That is not sustainable. So I share this because I am an American citizen, as most of you are. And I feel it's important for us to have a collective awareness of these three poisons, not just on a personal level, but on a more systemic level. Because when we have that awareness, then we will know what better to do, what better not to do our part to contribute to less suffering. Whether the climate is going full tilt or gradual, whatever we do in our daily life can contribute to its acceleration and a lot of suffering, not just for the animals and plants, but the people, a lot of suffering. Or we can move in the other direction, and that is a manifestation of compassion to ameliorate as much suffering as we can by our mindful actions. So attachment, craving, and greed on a collective level. Now, on a personal level, that's very easy. We can pinpoint our cravings, our attachments very easily by taking away something that we kind of like and seeing what that touches in us. In the absence of what we want, we already suffer. That's why it's a poison, this attachment, this craving for things. Aversion is the same. It's just the flip side. Aversion or hatred in the collective sphere, in terms of discrimination, in terms of fear, in terms of othering, in terms of being okay with the circumstances of suffering of other people. I'll give you an example. In Louisiana, there is an area that's called Cancer Alley. Maybe some of you may be aware of Cancer Alley, but it's a place where all the industrial sites have congregated because it's the easiest, the poorest area, the most expedient area to do their dirty work and to dump out their toxins. And the result is that a disproportionate of impoverished people, and of those impoverished people, a disproportionate number of BIPOC, specifically our Black and Latinx members of the community, are suffering from the effects. Cancer, So that's why Cancer Alley, this is called an environmental sacrifice zone. From this place of aversion, of othering, of being okay with this experience, we create collectively spaces of ill-being in our society like that, physically of the land, the dumping, and then of the people, let alone speaking of the people. Our aversions in our daily life, they create spaces for us to turn away from one another, to not address one another, to engage in other activities to distract ourselves from the things that we find aversive. And it doesn't allow us to grow, to move forward, to transform. And lastly, of course, the seed of ignorance or delusion. In Sangha, maybe many of us here are Sangha members. We may like to pose the question, how comfortable do we feel in our Sangha? It's a very pertinent question. How comfortable do I feel to really show up as I am, wholly as myself, without fear of judgment, because I feel understood, because I feel held? These questions are helpful for us because it shines a light on the degree of awareness that we have as a collective towards any given individual, any given community in our Sangha, whether it's BIPOC or LGBTQIA+, or differently abled, or of a different age. These are all areas that point to the degree of awareness and empathy that is engendered by our awareness. I'm very thankful for our North American Caretaking Council, Wake Up Caretaking Council, for putting out the demographic survey to help the whole community see more clearly who's showing up and who's not showing up in our local sanghas. And this is also the work of our monasteries as well. We are also in the process of looking more deeply to see what is our awareness as it relates to our ignorance of the real lived experiences of members in our community. So ignorance can be, awareness of our ignorance can be a catalyst to help wake us up to more empathy, more awareness. Someone has sent a message that you cannot see the content of the shared screen. Is that true? Has everyone been able to see? If you can you give me a thumbs up? Okay. Someone's playing with me in the chat window there. All right. Okay, as long as most of us can see it, that's okay. If I can ask for a sound of the bell and invite us to sit in awareness with the soil of our consciousness, aversions, attachments, ignorance, all there with our ancestors. And at the same time, we're breathing and able to embrace that, breathing and smiling to the imperfections of our humanity. When I was a novice, a line of a song came to me. In the moment, my heart is bleeding, but I'm smiling to myself. Sometimes that is exactly what we need to do to continue on the path of well-being. When we touch the afflictions in us, when we touch our shortcomings, or when we feel hurt by something else, that smile of awareness, of acceptance of our humanity, of the other person's humanity, is the saving grace that helps us move forward. Okay, so so this is actually, all this is just to prepare you for the main part of this talk. Okay, so the suffering that we touch in our daily life, how does it relate to our happiness? The soil of our consciousness, with all these poisons that are there. As the Buddha taught, there's the path. The path is a path of equilibrium. So we always have to conscientiously remind ourselves from that place of pure awareness, from the place of stopping, stilling, coming back to a baseline, resetting. We become aware of the supportive elements also in our soil, also within our reach to support us. And here I'm sharing this, especially with my monastic siblings in mind, with my younger monastic siblings in mind, because we have a lot of support around us if we know how to look for it and how to tap into it. Okay, so first of all, we come back to a very foundational support for all of us. What is it that gets you out of bed in the morning? It can be something big or small. Just last week, I woke up and the funniest thought came in through my head was that I have to water the bean sprouts. That's what got me excited to get out of my bed, to water the bean sprouts. Our aspirations are the thing that nourishes our motivation to connect, to nurture, to sustain, to grow something, right? And when we're in a place of disconnect, it's especially helpful to touch, to burnish our aspirations and to revisit them. What is it that really excites me? And if the answer to that question is nothing, then that's in and of itself very helpful response, because in our practice of looking, then we begin to explore what is it that used to inspire me, and what might be missing that is blocking me. It's like we begin to tease out our ill-being and look at the situation more carefully, instead of, like I said, the second option, overwhelm, going into old habits, bad habits, and just putting down our suffering as an untouchable monster that just keeps growing when we keep the door closed on it. So our aspirations, what gets us out of bed? I believe my brother Phep Yung, was planning to share more deeply about aspirations, so I will just touch on that very briefly. But as I go through these supportive elements, I'd like to ask you to keep them in mind. How awake are they in your daily life? And again, I'm also talking to my monastic younger siblings. Secondly, we have our ethical trainings. In our tradition, we call it the 5 mindfulness trainings, or the Order of Interbeing's 14 mindfulness trainings, or as monastics, our 5 billion gazillion trainings that help us go on the right path. Why this is a source of support for us is because these trainings, which we will explore further in this retreat, these trainings help protect us from falling off so far that it's very difficult to come to a place of peace and clarity and calm. Because the end goal of our practice towards well-being is to touch an understanding, a depth of understanding. And if we are so roiled by our afflictions through our unskillful actions or through engagement with unskillful actions of others, then it really puts a dent in our capacity to reach that depth of understanding and freedom. So if we have the training that talks to us directly about our way of consuming not just food, but other things, social media, drugs, alcohol, it's a stopper. It's a reminder for us that there is perhaps a more wholesome direction that we can go in if we bring our awareness to that and put our intention towards that. So the trainings, they protect us and they point us in a wholesome direction. How awake, how part of your life are the ethical trainings in your daily life? Do you recite them regularly with your Sangha? Do you have them there for you to reflect on when you come to a crossroads and have a question about ethical behavior? Thirdly, community. For our monastics, that means our monastery community. For you, it may be your circle of friends or your local wake-up Sangha. Community is that place that holds us accountable to our aspirations and our actions because it manifests in the way we interact with one another. I've been so very lucky to be in touch with the Earthholder Sangha during this pandemic. And it has helped me to keep alive, keep aware of this aspiration in my heart to protect, to earth hold, because I'm with others who have that same intention. Now, community life is not always easy. But I remember when I became a monastic, when I entered the community life, I didn't sign up to be a monastic because I thought it would be easy. And I didn't sign up to be a monastic because of the community. But the monastic lifestyle spoke to my desire to live a simple life, free from distractions. And it spoke to this direct connection with compassionate action that I didn't encounter in any other avenue. And so in community, we do meet up with challenges. In our local sanghas, there are those people in those sanghas that maybe go very counter to how we would see the world, how we would interact with. It even seems like their values are so different from us. But that is the very gem of community, is that it challenges us to remain true to our commitments, our aspirations, and our actions. It helps us dig more deeply into our capacity to be resilient. And that capacity to be resilient, to see things through to the other side, is a quality, a strength that carries through to all other areas of our life. It contributes to our well-being in all other areas of our life. So community, whether it's challenging or very joyful and easeful at times, it's still a support for our practice, for our well-being. Are you in a community? And if you aren't, would you consider joining a community? Because you nourish the community just as you can be nourished by a community. Fourthly, we have the teachings. Nowadays, the teachings are so easy to access. It's not like you have to travel by foot for months on end to reach an enlightened teacher to hear from afar a few phrases that to take home with you, right? Nowadays, you can open up any device and ask the question, what would Tay say about holding on to resentment? What was his question and answer to the kids about true love? We have a whole store of teachings of the Buddha, of so many spiritual teachers, both in the Buddhist and non-Buddhist tradition, available at our hands to dip into when we are in need, when we are touching difficulties or challenges. And this is, sometimes we could say this is an oft under-resourced element of support in our communities. So if we are aware that it's out there, then we have a chance to dig into it and to nourish ourselves with the teachings. So what are these wisdom teachings? Our teachings in the Buddhist tradition, our teacher says the cream of the crop teaching is the insight of interbeing, of interconnectedness, of non-self, that opens up our horizons, opens up our heart to a newer possibility of being, of relating to one another, of relating to the world. That's healing, that's hope-filled. So the teachings of interbeing, the Four Noble Truths, the shining light of suffering and its relationship with happiness, and the way to get from suffering to happiness, very concrete, practical teachings that are there for us to dip into. Amongst our siblings, we have the chance to Dharma discuss, like really have a true Dharma sharing about what's going on in our life as it relates to our practice, our application of the wisdom teachings, the Four Immeasurable Minds, nonviolence. All of these are wisdom teachings that are either there dusty on the shelf or can be breathed life into. And lastly, the thing that binds all of this together, and the main question for us here, is our spiritual practice. It's the water that integrates and brings all of these elements together into the roots, into our consciousness, from the collective into our personal consciousness. So you can see it as water. It is how we engage with the ethical trainings that we learn, how we engage with our aspirations that we give rise to, how we engage with the community and apply these various teachings, these trainings in a concrete way towards our fellow siblings. Let us have one sound of the bell. And this time, in this space of listening, we also touch a kind of celebration. We touch the bounty of our resources in ourselves and around us as we breathe in and breathe out. Okay, so in a nutshell, the path of well-being is finding and walking this path of balance, knowing how to surf the waves of our suffering, to touch the suffering, but at the same time, to touch nourishing elements around us so that we know how to amend the soil of our consciousness, to better tend to those wounds and not fall into overwhelm, not fall into our habits. I really like the gatha of the happiness of one toe is the happiness of the whole body. It's such a humble phrase, but it reminds me the power of awareness, the agency it gives us when we have the right attention to focus on the things that are supporting us, nourishing us. And it reminds me that when we touch well-being in one part of our life, it has the effect of supporting the other areas of our life. Some time ago, I injured my shoulder, and it was out of commission for quite a while, and caused me quite a lot of discomfort. But at the same time, there were so many other parts of my body, parts of my physical experience that were doing fine, doing okay. And those parts were the ones that could help support, carry, and heal my shoulder. Our body is just a mirror of our mind. There are parts of our psyche that are suffering. There are relationships that are wounded, but that doesn't mean that the entire experience, emotionally, mentally, is mired in that suffering. So this awareness of the support is essential to help us bring us from that place of one little toe back to the whole body becoming nourished again. And that's what we mean by resilience turning into regeneration. Though we touch suffering, we have the tools of stopping and embracing. Embracing means to hold tenderly with acceptance and attentiveness, to continue looking into the suffering, not to neglect it, not to deny it, not to downplay it. And in that process, we touch other supportive conditions in our environment that helps to heal and to regenerate. And that is why beginning anew is a very alive practice in our tradition, because it may take a long time, but the intention and the direction is there, because we are organic by nature. Our psyche, our body, everything about us is organic and dynamic in nature. So we are invited, when we look at this this time in our reset as we come out of the pandemic, to really set the right intention. Are we setting the intention to touch something more deeply in ourselves? Are we waiting for things to open up so we can go back to the way things were? There is a danger in that, because back to the way things were, if we live not so deeply, we will not see that there are areas in our personal and our collective life that still needs tending to. So back to the way things were, that by default means back to our old habits. Mother Earth is suffering right now because we tend to go back to the way we see things, unaware that we are in year 8 or 9 of a great collapse. Okay, so thank you for your patience. I'm admittedly juggling a little bit with technology here. And so please take these pauses as silent bells of mindfulness to just enjoy the moment and maybe smile with empathy at a gauche monastic. Okay, so to sum up, from a place of busyness or habit, we slow down and we become that pure awareness. Each time we come back to the breath, each time we come back to the awareness of the body through the breath, awareness of our sensations through the breath, awareness of the emotion through the breath. We may touch, as we go more deeply into our self-knowledge, difficulties, the 3 poisons in ourselves, or we may suffer from those 3 poisons that are visited upon us by our environment, by society, by others. At the same time, we know it's a balance. The path of well-being is a path of balance. We know that we need to dip into these supportive elements also there in the soil of our consciousness. The question is, what is it that you need right now? Right? And as we continue to practice to find this balance between the suffering that we touch and arises and the holding, the embracing, we grow our capacity of resilience. We grow our capacity to understand more deeply the context of our ill-being. And when we understand the context, then we understand the way out of that suffering. So from the place of support and nourishment, understanding arises. And as I had shared before, understanding is the thing that gives us freedom. That is the thing that gives us the capacity to be resilient, to see through those things that normally would push us over the edge. And so from a place of deepening day by day in our daily practice, it gives rise to resilience. Our roots are more firmly rooted in the nourishing elements of our soil. And from this capacity to be resilient, it becomes the foundation for us to innovate, to grow something new. Now, as we come out of the pandemic, there's a lot of ideas, and we often hear the word, let us reimagine the future, what that might be like. For example, what might a non-extractive economy look like? Right? But reimagining doesn't come from a surface level of way of living. It comes from a deeper depth, touching the deeper depths of our living in order to give rise to insight, to understanding, so that what we do actually reimagine comes from our embodied experience, not from the intellect. And from our embodied experience, it becomes something that is sustainable. So we really need you, all of us. To maintain this spiritual connection with what is going on inside of us and what is going on outside of us. Because it will take all of us to change the trajectory of our current situation as a planet. We really need your capacity to be resilient. We really need your true presence to truly reimagine and manifest a better future for all of us. Each one of us plays a very important role in this. And this is the spirit of wake up. So as much as we may be suffering now, please know that you have in yourself the full capacity for healing. We just need a path which we shared about today. It's a very concrete path of practice in order to take care of our suffering, to move in a collective direction of healing and regeneration. Thank you for your listening. And as always, thank you for your heart.
So, dear respected teacher, dear respected community, first of all, we would like to express our deepest gratitude for Sister Thể Nghiêm to offer us a wonderful Dhamma talk this morning. Thank you, Sister. And I would like to make some announcement for the next activities today. But first of all, on behalf of the organizing team, the retreat organizing team, and the monastics at Deer Park Monastery, to express our deep gratitude for our brothers and sisters from Magnolia Grove Monastery and Blue Cliff Monastery, and all our friends for coming together to give support and to participate in this retreat together to take care of ourselves and our community and our world. And this is the truest act of love of all of us. So thank you. So our next activities for our brothers and sisters from Blue Cliff and Magnolia Grove monasteries, and our friends from the Eastern Daylight Time and Central Daylight Time is lunch at 12:30. And the next activity for our friends and the brothers and sisters from Deer Park Monastery will be walking meditation, and the walking meditation will be offline, followed by a short period of working meditation. So for us to prepare our lunch, and lunch will be at 12:30 Pacific Daylight Time. So for lunch, for all of us, we would like to invite everyone to come to our virtual dining room to participate in our mindful lunch together. So when we arrive in our virtual dining room, we will sit down and wait for each other, and then we will listen to 3 sounds of the bell and the 5 contemplations. And then we will eat our lunch in silence for about 15 minutes. And then after that, we will hear 1 sound of the bell, and we will be break out to breakout rooms for a short interactions with each other to get to know each other on the first day of the retreat. So again, thank you so much for being here in these 5 days and being here today. And we wish everyone a wonderful retreat and a beautiful day today. Thank you so much. Also, please check and follow the daily schedule that's sent out from the organizing team. Thank you.
So with the sound of the small bell, we will offer a bow of gratitude for all of us together. And then in the monasteries, we'll turn to the altar. You may like to turn to your altar that touches the awakened nature in yourself and all of us, and we'll bow a second time. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the retreat. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, sister.
Thank you.